God's story. God provides for Elijah. So part of God's story is about how God provided for Elijah, and it goes like this. Elijah was part of God's family, the Israelites. He was also a prophet. That means he heard from God and told others about it. Unfortunately, a king named Ahab was ruling over God's family, and Ahab did not worship God. Instead, he worshipped an idol named Baal. So God told Elijah to pray that there would be no rain for 3 years. And that's exactly what happened. This made King Ahab really angry, and that meant Elijah was in danger. To keep Elijah safe, God told him to go hide in the wilderness. Elijah might have wondered how he was going to survive out there all by himself, with no food or water. But God had a plan to take care of him. He told Elijah, "You will drink from a river, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there." So Elijah drank water from the river, and ravens brought him bread and meat every morning and every evening. Elijah depended on God for everything, and God provided exactly what he needed. A little while later, the river dried up because there wasn't any rain. Remember, no rain equals no food or water. So God told him to go to a town where he would meet a widow who would give him food. Now, a widow is someone whose husband has died. And back then, that meant they didn't have anyone to provide for them. So they were very poor. Why would God tell him to get food that way? Elijah didn't know exactly why, but he trusted and obeyed God. Kids, would you trust God even if it didn't make sense? When Elijah arrived at the town gate, a widow was there, gathering sticks. He asked her if she would bring him some water in a jar to drink and a piece of bread to eat. The widow said, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, so we may eat it and die." This widow barely had any food and water, but Elijah knew that God would provide what they needed. So he said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." Even though the widow was afraid she wouldn't have enough food, she decided to trust Elijah and do what he said. She shared her food with him, and guess what happened? There was enough food every day for Elijah and the widow and her son. The jar of flour was never empty, and the jug of oil never ran dry, just like God promised. A little while after that, the widow's son got very sick and died. The widow was heartbroken. She had done what God asked, but still, her son was dead. Elijah took the widow's son from her arms and laid him on a bed. Then he cried out to God, "Lord my God, give this boy's life back to him." Then suddenly, the boy came back to life. The widow was amazed. She realized that God was powerful and trustworthy and always does what he says he'll do. Sometimes we might not be sure if we'll have what we need, but God wants us to trust him no matter what. When Elijah had no food and water and no place to stay, God provided what he needed. When the widow and her son didn't have enough food and water, God provided what they needed. When the widow's son died, God did an amazing miracle and brought the boy back to life. God took care of them in unexpected ways, and he takes care of us in unexpected ways too. We just have to trust him. And that's the story of how God provided for Elijah. So in case you missed it, here's the quick version. Elijah was a prophet. He prayed for a famine. God sent him to the wilderness. God sent ravens to give him food. God sent Elijah to a widow. The widow shared her food. God provided. God saved the widow's son. God takes care of us too. And that's a part of God's story.